The light tank M24 Chaffee. I think most of us know it, but I got a feeling the tank is largely overshadowed by the Sherman, Pershing or even the Stuarts. So what exactly is this American Scout? Today I will do my best and try to explain the history behind the one and only M24 Chaffee. To begin, we need to talk about the Stuart light tanks first. These tanks were developed around 1940. The fall of France had a big impact on the world, therefore America had to step up the game at designing tanks. They started out as cavalry tanks, but they were later repurposed as official light tanks. Their main purpose was to spot and scout for other Allied forces. The most well-known variants are the M2 Stuart, M3 and M5. Still, while being fast, they lacked proper armament and good armor to put up a fight against most German armor. This was not helped by the fact that the Stuarts were not made to combat other tanks. So later in the war they were used mainly in the Pacific to fight the Japanese, as they were much more effective over there. So overall it's not a bad vehicle, but it was fighting opponents which were basically superior in every way. And this was not helped by the Sherman. Your average do-it-all tank also entered service. This made the demand for a better light tank, one that was more buffed, and this spark started the fire of the M24 Chaffee. Again, the demand for a better armed and armored light tank was high. Ordnance Department decided to work together with Cadillac, who were also the former designers of the M5 series. They would show Ordnance what a good, brand new light tank would look like. It would incorporate features from the Stuarts and from the M7, a previous failed design. With this, a pilot vehicle named T-24 was created. T-24 sounds familiar now, doesn't it? That's right, this was the prototype of the M24 Chaffee. The T-24 pilot was completed in October 1943. This American wonder weapon was so successful that Ordnance immediately ordered 1,000 AFVs, and this number was later even increased to 5,000. The T-24 used a twin Cadillac liquid-cooled engine and a hydromatic suspension similar to the M5 Stuart, and with this powerhouse it had a top speed on road of 56 km per hour or 35 miles per hour. Of course, it would mean nothing if the gun was still weak, so it was decided to mount the lightweight M5 75mm gun. This gun was lighter and more compactor than the M3 75mm gun. Due to the weight restrict of maximum 20 tons, the armor had to be kept at a limit of 25mm. The T-24 was accepted for production and changed to the M24. The production started in March 1944 at the Cadillac and Messrs. Harris plants. I probably didn't pronounce that right. The first Chafees were delivered in late 1944, and the M24 was nicknamed Chaffee, called after General Edna Chaffee. However, this name was suggested by the British with their love for nicknames, and later it was adopted by the US Army. The Chaffee had a crew of 4, a gunner, driver, commander and assistant driver. Interestingly, the assistant driver would act as the loader once the Chaffee was in action. The option of using a 5th crew member was of course possible. It was a classic tank with a driving compartment at the front, fighting compartment in the middle and the engine compartment in the rear. Being a light tank, armor was again very thin. The 75mm gun could elevate by 15 degrees and depress by -10. And it would not have been an American tank if the thing wouldn't have machine guns. It used a coaxial 30 cal Browning machine gun in the turret, and of course that's nowhere near armed enough, so a second 30 caliber machine gun was mounted in the hull near the assistant driver. To top it off, a 50 cal anti-aircraft machine gun was mounted on the top of the turret. To speed through some more statistics, the M24 used 2 8-cylinder engines, 2 hydromatic transmissions, a transfer unit which mechanically selected speed ranges, and 2 final drives. The tracks were wide steel block tracks. These 16 inches wide tracks proved good traction. A torsion arm suspension was also used for dual track wheels. The M24 did arrive a bit late. It saw its first frontline service in the winter of 1944 during the Battle of the Bulge. One of the first units to be lucky enough to get the M24 was the 740th Tank Battalion. Over time, the M24 Chaffee continued to replace the older Stuarts as they became available in higher numbers. They were also given to the 23rd Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron and the 16th Armored Division. They used their Chafees to advance toward Pilsen in Czechoslovakia in May 1945. Though not seeing active service due to the end of the war, M24s did make it to Japan, but again they only served for occupation duties in Japan. The M24 was chosen over the Pershing and the Sherman for a reason, however. Due to their small size and weight and higher speeds, they were much better to use, and Japan's infrastructure didn't like the more heavier vehicles of the Americans. But while missing out on World War II, the Chaffee would really prove its worth during the Korean War. However, it was eventually phased out due to the rise of the new M41 Walker Bulldog. A lot of variants were made as well. For once, the M24 Chaffee was capable of using a dozer blade. Some 285 units of the M19 MGMC were produced. This thing used twin 40mm AA guns. It used them in an AA mount, which would become standard US Army equipment for many years to come. As well as the M41 HMC, or unofficially known as the Gorilla, was created using the hull of the M24 Chaffee. This thing had a 155mm M1 howitzer. Many less successful prototypes were also created, such as the T-77E1 and the T-38 mortar motor carriage. The M24 Chaffee would see service under many other flags, both during and after World War II. Britain was one of the lucky ones to get their hands on the M24 early. The US exported them in 1945 and they remained in service for a little while. Britain had ordered 842 vehicles, but not all of those were delivered. The 7th Armored Division, known as the Desert Rats, used M24 Chafees, with sadly at least 2 units being lost before the end of the war. 28 M24 Chafees were under command of the 7th Armored Division in June of 1945. Around the summer of the same year, some were sent to Italy and India for training. Even Soviet Russia was supplied with 2 M24 Chafees. Most British M24s were given to the Dutch army, with some surviving to this day. Canada also received some Chafees, with the first one being delivered in May of 1945. More would later be given, making a total of 21 units. They would be declared obsolete by the Canadian Army in 1958. For the rest, Australia, Belgium and France also got some, as well as a lot of other countries. If we jump into the future, the M24 Chaffee would see service even in the 2000s. Countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh used them till 1971. The Stridsvogn M24 was a Chaffee in Norwegian service. This thing saw use until the 1990s. However, that would not be the end, as it would be revived. M24 Chafees were modernized into the NM116 Panzerjäger. This was just a much needed buff Chaffee and saw service until 1993. Around 72 M24s were converted. Later the turrets would be used to guard the coast, but the crown for the longest serving Chafees goes to Uruguay. These 70 M24s would be the last Chafees to see service. They were purchased in 1957 till 1958 and would make it into 2019 before finally getting their deserved rest after a whopping 61 years of service. Fortunately, these beautiful machines have not been forgotten, and while not actively fighting anymore, they are still used for ceremonial uses. It is almost frightening to think how long these Chafees have performed their duty. Another interesting vehicle is the M24 Chaffee with a 60mm HVMS gun. These things were from Chile. Chile didn't have the budget for high-tech tanks, therefore they had to get creative. They bought some M24s and upgraded them. Chile would also use things like the M51 and M50 Super Sherman. So, the light tank M24 Chaffee. While of course being hopeless to win tank-on-tank engagements, it performed exceptionally well in other duties. It was simple, rapid and reliable, and overall a successful design. Not to mention, it actually worked. Even though it largely missed World War II, it still performed well, and even after World War II, it proved to be an impeccable design. So what do you guys think about the M24 Chaffee? Do you think it deserves more fame? Or do you guys think that tanks such as the Sherman were better? Let me know, I'm always interested in hearing your guys' opinions. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe, like and share this video, and I hopefully will be seeing you all in the next one.